The hardest part about winning millions wasn't deciding how to spend the money. It was deciding who deserved to know it existed. People think winning the lottery solves every problem. They imagine luxury cars, dream vacations, giant houses, and a life where nothing ever goes wrong again. I believed that too. Until I stood alone in a tiny convenience store, holding a lottery ticket that was suddenly worth more money than I could spend in 10 lifetimes. That was the exact moment I realized money doesn't just change your life. It changes everyone else's. So before I told a single person, I made one decision. I would let everyone believe I was still broke. And what happened over the next 6 months taught me more about wealth than winning the lottery ever could. 6 months earlier, I was living in a one-bedroom apartment above an old hardware store. The walls were so thin I could hear my neighbor arguing with his television every night. My car had over 200,000 miles on it. Every time I started the engine, I wondered if it would be the last. My paycheck arrived every other Friday, and by Monday, most of it was already gone. Rent, groceries, insurance, gas, bills, then repeat, again and again. People think being broke means having no money. They're wrong. Being broke means constantly doing math in your head. Can I afford coffee today? If I buy this, can I still pay my electric bill? Maybe I can wait until next week. Every decision felt expensive. Every unexpected expense felt like a disaster waiting to happen. I wasn't lazy. I worked hard, sometimes 60 hours a week. But no matter how much I earned, I never seemed to get ahead. That's when I started noticing something. The richest people I followed online rarely talked about buying things. They talked about owning things, businesses, investments, assets. Meanwhile, everyone around me, including myself, was focused on surviving until the next paycheck. I remember thinking, maybe money doesn't change people. Maybe it simply reveals the habits they already have. At the time, I had no idea how true that thought would become. The day everything changed. It was a Thursday evening. Nothing special. I stopped at the same gas station I visited every week. Filled the tank halfway because payday was still 2 days away. As I walked inside to pay, the cashier smiled. "You want your usual ticket?" I almost said no. I almost walked away, but something made me stop. Yeah, just one. A few days later, I scanned the ticket on my phone. The screen froze for a second, then a message appeared. "Please visit your state lottery office." I laughed. I thought the app had crashed. I scanned it again. Same message. My hands started shaking. I drove to the lottery office the next morning expecting someone to tell me there had been a mistake. Instead, a woman in a navy blue suit walked into the room, sat across from me, smiled, and quietly said, "Congratulations, you've just won $289 million. Everything after that became a blur. I couldn't hear the rest of what she was saying. My heartbeat drowned out every word. I signed papers I barely remembered reading. I answered questions I can't remember being asked. When I finally walked outside, the world looked exactly the same. Cars still drove past. People were still rushing to work. Someone was complaining about the weather. Nobody knew the man standing on that sidewalk had just become one of the wealthiest people in the city. And that's when something unexpected happened. Instead of excitement, I felt fear. Not fear of losing the money, fear of losing the people I loved, because I'd heard the stories. Families torn apart, friendships destroyed, lawsuits, manipulation, greed, everyone suddenly wanting something. I didn't want to spend the rest of my life wondering, do they love me or my money? So before I called my parents, before I texted my closest friends, before I bought a single thing, I made one promise to myself. No one would know. Not yet. Not until I discovered who they really were. When they believed, I still had nothing. The first thing I did was absolutely nothing. No new car, no luxury apartment, no expensive watch, no social media posts, no celebration. If someone looked at my life from the outside, I was still the same broke guy trying to survive another month. Even my bank account looked almost empty. Most of the money was locked away with financial advisors and legal teams while everything was being finalized. For the first time in my life, I wasn't thinking about what to buy. I was thinking about what money could accidentally destroy. I remembered reading that nearly 70% of lottery winners eventually lose or damage important relationships. Whether that statistic was perfectly accurate or not didn't matter. The stories were real. Money had a strange way of changing conversations, changing expectations, changing people. I wasn't going to let that happen without knowing the truth first. So I made one simple rule. For 6 months, nobody would know. Life goes on. Monday morning, I showed up at work exactly on time. Same faded backpack. Same old car that squeaked every time I hit the brakes. Same coffee from the cheapest machine in the office. Nothing had changed, or at least that's what everyone believed. During lunch, my coworkers were talking about money. I swear, one of them laughed. If I ever win the lottery, you'll never see me again. Everyone laughed. Another guy said, I'd buy the biggest house I could find. Someone else wanted a Lamborghini, a yacht, private islands. Everyone had a dream. Then one of them looked at me. What about you? If you won millions tomorrow, what would you do? I smiled. I honestly don't know. They laughed. You'd probably still drive that old piece of junk. I laughed with them, but inside, I already knew something they didn't. The first test. A week later, my best friend Ryan called. Hey man, my rent's due tomorrow. I'm short $800. Can you help me out? A month earlier, I couldn't have helped even if I wanted to. Now, I could have paid his rent for the next 20 years. Instead, I paused. Not because I didn't care, because this was exactly the kind of moment I'd been waiting for. I can lend you 200. It's all I have. There was silence. Then, oh, never mind. His voice changed. He ended the call less than a minute later. No thanks. No, I appreciate it. Just disappointment. I sat there staring at my phone, not because of the money, because for the first time, I wondered if our friendship had always been built on what I could do for him, or if I was overthinking everything. I hoped it was the second. I really did. A few days later, I visited my parents. Nothing fancy, just Sunday dinner. My mom was cooking. Dad was fixing a broken cabinet because, as he always said, why replace something that still works? We ate together, laughed, talked about ordinary things. Then my younger cousin Ethan walked in. He had started another business, his third one in 2 years. None of them had worked. He pulled me aside. I've got another idea. This one's different. I just need someone who believes in me. Then came the question, can you lend me $5,000? $5,000. A week earlier, that number would have felt impossible. Now, it was smaller than the interest my investments could earn in a single afternoon. But I looked him in the eyes and said quietly, I wish I could. I just don't have it. He forced a smile. It's okay. But the rest of the evening, he barely spoke to me. When everyone left, I heard him whisper to another relative, he's always broke. He'll never get anywhere. Those words shouldn't have hurt, but they did, because just hours earlier, I had quietly paid off my parents' mortgage. Anonymous, no name, no explanation. The bank simply informed them the loan had been settled. They spent the entire evening wondering if some kind of accounting mistake had happened. Watching them smile, without knowing I was the reason, was worth more than any luxury car I could have bought. And somehow, it hurt even more hearing someone call me a failure, the person I never expected. Weeks passed. Some people slowly disappeared. Texts became shorter. Invitations stopped. Phone calls became less frequent. It was almost as if people lost interest because they believed I had nothing to offer. Then, one evening, someone knocked on my apartment door. It was my grandmother. She was carrying 2 grocery bags. I figured you'd forgotten to eat. She smiled. I made too much soup. I laughed. She knew. She always knew. She looked around my tiny apartment. Same old furniture, same peeling paint, same broken lamp I'd been meaning to replace. She reached into her purse, pulled out a folded envelope, and placed it on the table. There isn't much, but sometimes life gets expensive. Inside was $300, probably a month's savings for her. I looked at her. I can't take this. She smiled. You've helped this family your whole life. Now let someone help you. My eyes filled with tears. She believed I was struggling, and without asking for anything in return, she gave me what little she had. That envelope was worth more to me than the $289 million sitting in my investment account, because for the first time, I knew exactly what unconditional love looked like. But I had no idea. The biggest betrayal was still waiting for me. The biggest betrayal. About 5 months into my experiment, I got a call from Ryan, the same friend who had barely spoken to me since I couldn't lend him $800. His voice sounded different, almost excited. Hey, you still working at the warehouse? Yeah. Listen, I've got an investment opportunity. He explained how a friend of his had doubled his money in just a few weeks. He needed investors, people who trusted him. Then he asked, I know it's risky, but this could change your life. For a second, I didn't know whether to laugh or cry. He believed I was broke, yet he wanted me to risk the little I had chasing a promise. I'll pass. His tone changed immediately. You'll always stay broke with that mindset. Then he hung up. A week later, I learned the investment had collapsed. People lost everything. Some even borrowed money they couldn't repay. That phone call stayed with me. Not because I almost lost money, but because someone I trusted was willing to risk my future to protect his own. The secret leaks. A few weeks later, something happened that I never planned for. My attorney called. Someone has been asking questions. Apparently, a local reporter had noticed an anonymous trust purchasing several properties. My name hadn't been published, but it was only a matter of time. The experiment was over. I couldn't keep hiding forever, so I decided, if the truth was coming, it would come from me, not the news. I invited everyone over, friends, family, people I'd known for years. They all assumed it was another ordinary barbecue. Nobody expected what was about to happen, the reveal. After dinner, I stood up. My hands were shaking more than they had the day I won. I need to tell you something. The room went quiet. I've been keeping a secret for 6 months. Confused faces looked back at me. I won the lottery. Silence. I won $289 million. No one spoke. For several seconds, it felt like time had stopped. Then came the questions. What? You're joking. When? How? My cousin Ethan was the first to stand. So, you had all that money and still told me you couldn't help? I looked at him. I wanted to know who wanted me and who wanted my money. The room became painfully quiet. Ryan stared at the floor. He couldn't even look at me. Then my grandmother spoke, the same gentle voice she'd always had. She smiled. I would have brought you that soup anyway. That one sentence hit harder than anything else that night. What I did with the money. People assume this is the part where I bought a mansion, or 10 sports cars, or a private jet. I didn't. I invested most of it. Index funds, real estate, businesses that produced income instead of attention. I paid off my parents' mortgage, started college funds for my nieces and nephews, created a charity that quietly paid medical bills for families who couldn't afford them. No cameras, no headlines, just help. Because I'd learned something during those 6 months. Money is loud when you're trying to impress people, but it's incredibly quiet when you're trying to change lives. The lesson. Winning millions didn't show me who was greedy. It showed me who was grateful. It didn't reveal who loved money. It revealed who loved people. For years, I believed wealth meant having more income, more freedom, more choices. But real wealth turned out to be something completely different. It's having relationships that don't depend on your bank balance. Ending. Sometimes people ask me, if you could go back, would you still buy that lottery ticket? My answer surprises them. Yes, but not because of the money. Because for 6 months, I got to see people exactly as they were. No masks, no pretending, no performance. Just truth. And that truth gave me something money never could. Peace. Because now I know the richest person in the room isn't always the one with the biggest bank account. It's the one surrounded by people who would still be there if every dollar disappeared tomorrow. Money changes your lifestyle. Character determines your legacy.